start our session. And in fact, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening for people who have joined from different parts of the world. Thank you for joining this particular session of TRIZtalks, Chapter 3. I will request all the participants to keep yourself on mute mode. Okay. And I'd like to welcome Vinodh Mewani, who is the Deputy General Manager R&D and IP Cell for TVS Motors Company Private Limited. And he is also a TRIZ Level 3 professional. So I will not eat much of his time. So I will ask Vinodh to explain about himself and his passion about TRIZ and his experience on TRIZ. Over to you, Vinodh.
Thanks, Narayan.
Participants, please keep your microphone on mute in case you are not speaking. Over to you, Vinodh.
Is there an option for you to mute all?
I have an option, but they still unmute themselves.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Narayan, for inviting me to be the speaker for this session of TRIZtalks from TRIZX for TRIZAsia. And thanks all the participants for joining in on a Friday afternoon. So I have total experience of around 8 years now in TRIZ. So my TRIZ journey started sometime around 2012 or 13. So, and I in fact actually started as a foot soldier. So if you look in army, foot soldiers are not expected to ask any questions. They're just supposed to follow orders, no matter how silly or the stupid the order may seem to you. So that's how my TRIZ journey started. So one of my colleagues, when I was back in GE, pulled me in and said that TRIZ is an interesting tool. And he was already a level 1 with sufficient experience and getting into level 2. So he told me that I'm trying to write a paper on it to DBA co-author. I said, okay. And then he told me that do this, do task A, I would do that, do task B, I would do that. Is voice not clear for others?
Probably switch off your video, Vinodh.
Okay. Just a minute. So is my voice better now?
Much better.
Okay. So if there is still an issue with voice, please let me know. So my colleague would ask me to do first perform task A, and then I'll do that, and then he'll ask me to do B. And I had no idea what it was. So then at the end of it, when the paper was ready, then I realized what TRIZ is and what a powerful tool it is. And in fact, after I had my first paper publication, I did my level 1, and then level 2, and then level 3. And in GE, it is not easy to progress after level 1 that easily, because every year there will be at least 3 or 4 sessions of level 1, each with 20 to 25 participants. So close to 100 people get certified with level 1 every year. And only 20 will progress to level 2. And then some of them to level 3. But thanks to this paper, I managed to do level 1, level 2, and level 3 in consecutive years. So that's briefly about me. So from then I've been doing TRIZ as a passion, as an not as a main core job. Still, there is some problem in voice.
So I'll do this. So I'll share on laptop, and then I'll talk through mobile.
Yep.
Yeah. So so that was my that's how I got exposed to TRIZ. And one challenge that I always faced while I was working in GE, and I was publishing papers in annual TRIZ conferences, whether it was TRIZ Fest conducted by Matriz or TRIZ or X or TRIZ, Bharat TRIZ itself. So any of these, the one challenge that I always faced was which technology to take to work on TRIZ and then to publish. Because GE was almost working on all technologies that you can pick, and many companies do not feel comfortable to publish data unless that have been filed as a patent application. And so if I have to take a topic and then work on it using TRIZ and then publish it, then it's going to be a long shot if I take something that G is already working. So we all who are working on TRIZ had this challenge, and we always used to take technology that G was not working. So that's so I'll present a few slides of one of my work, and you can see that that has nothing to do with what G worked. So before I go into my slides, I just want to know if there are anybody who's new to TRIZ, do not know TRIZ, and would want me to spend 5-7 minutes on telling what TRIZ is, or we can directly jump into it. So probably a raise of hand or a message would help me understand.
This is Narayan here, Vinodh. Probably there will be people who are new to TRIZ. So probably you can just touch base upon what TRIZ is very quickly, because there are people who are novice to TRIZ.
Okay. Okay, so then I'll share the screen accordingly. Just let me know when you can see my screen.
Visible.
Okay. See. I think there is some glitch. Because on my screen I'm seeing the list of participants. I want to minimize that. That's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so this is a slide I picked up from in London. There's one. So I think I missed some of the slides have gone. Okay, so TRIZ is basically a tool that would give you directions on how to innovate in a structured way. So most often, if you see, if we take a mechanical domain, then if there is a problem, then we are restricted by our expertise. We are experts in the area, but the flip side is that it becomes a bane for us.
Hello.
Area of expertise. Hello.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
You continue, Vinodh, nothing.
Okay. Okay.
I'm actually in a meeting.
Yeah. So
for another 1.5 hours. Is it okay if I call you back at 5:30? Thank you.
yeah. So Jay, can you please go on mute? Yeah. Thanks. So on one side, we call ourselves experts in the area, but on the other side, the flip side is that we are slaves to our technical expertise, and we can't think beyond our technological area. Whereas there could be a simple solution for a mechanical problem in an electrical area or in a biomedical area or in a pharmaceutical area. No problems. So that's what TRIZ tries to bring out. So it tries to complement or compensate for the weakness that we have in the form of expertise in our area. So that's essentially what TRIZ does. And it gives multiple directions in which you can look for solutions. It itself does not give solution. That's something that I keep telling everybody in every TRIZ session, because people have this myth that if I know TRIZ, then I'll get solutions. No, TRIZ will never give solutions to us. It will only give us directions in which you can look for solutions. And it's left to our intelligence and our creativity to a certain extent, I would say, that would help you find multiple solutions. So for example, if I ask today, what are the different ways one can move a liquid from one place to another? So then how many ways can we think of? So can people pitch in and tell a few ways in which you can move a liquid?
Suction.
Gravity.
Suction, gravity,
Capillary
move in a
action.
container,
Capillary action. Yeah.
pump, capillary action.
Siphoning.
Pardon?
Siphoning. Yeah.
Siphoning, okay.
Can convert the state, evaporate and then
Evaporation.
recharge it again.
Yeah, heating, evaporation. So we have come up with 6-7 ways of moving a liquid, or say 8 ways probably. And this, how did we come up with all these ways? Because we know them already. We have experienced it or we have read about it somewhere. So there are definitely ways that we do not know in which we can move a liquid. So how do we find out those ways? Where do we look for it? So, or do we at least know where to look for to find a solution to move the liquid? So this one I took it from S12 Gen 3 partners. They are now have a different name. So they have 45 ways in which they have told that you can move a liquid. Some of these, when you look, it will strike you, oh yeah, I forgot this. I didn't think about it. And some of them are totally new. You would have no idea that this is a way in which a liquid can be moved. So this exactly is what TRIZ helps us do. So the 8 solutions that we knew, it gives us direction to show that there are 30 plus more solutions that you can find. Do not restrict yourself with just the 8 solutions that you know. So that's what exactly TRIZ would help you. The knowledge of TRIZ, the understanding of TRIZ, the multiple levels, level 1, 2, and 3. So there are 5 levels of TRIZ, in which the first 3 levels are the taught in class, and 4th and 5th level are through research you get certified. So the first 3 levels of TRIZ at various stages through various methodologies helps you to arrive at this. So that's the first point that I discussed. And some of the other things for which you can think of TRIZ is typically in our engineering solutions or in our day-to-day, the way we solve problems. We don't accept contradictions. We trade off. We compromise. And TRIZ helps you in avoiding the trade-off, in not having the compromise, whereas you can deal with the contradiction and you can solve them as your secondary problems. And the other 2 points, we tend to focus on cost instead of value. So if at the beginning of journey of iPhone, if Apple had thought of it's very expensive, people would not buy. So then iPhone would not have come. So they did not think about cost, but they thought they worked on what's the value that I can give to the customer. And lastly, most of the times we shelve the idea because it's expensive, or we have to compromise, or it doesn't look like a good idea. So we shelve the idea instead of trying to solve the secondary problem. So these are some of the reasons why TRIZ would help you. And so this is the evolution of TRIZ itself. This again, I picked it from the Gen 3 partners. And there are various methodologies, problem solving tools, problem analyzing tools, and problem identification tools that are available with TRIZ. So I'll not go into detail with them, but some of the tools that I find extremely interesting and helpful are TESE, the one that you see in the first one, that's called Trends of Engineering System Evaluation, the Standard Inventive Solutions, Feature Transfer, Trimming, and S-Curve. So these are some 4-5 tools that I would say I'm pretty interested in, and gives you a lot of insights, and also would be very helpful for industry as a whole. So the work that I did way back in 2014-15, along with two of my colleagues, Anand Bishwas and Shrikant Adapalli. So both of them are not in GE now. And that is mainly based on these two concepts, TESE and then S-curve. So TESE is short form for Trends of Engineering System Evolution. And the ultimate aim of TESE is to arrive at S-curve evolution. So how does the S-curve for a given product or a given industry or a given feature looks like? So you can address or attack the S-curve at various levels. So if you take, say, a mobile industry, you can just look at the feature level of dialing in the number. So that's one feature of mobile phone. So how has the evolution of dialing the number evolved over time for a telephone device? So if you take the first telephone device or the earliest telephone devices, then they had two devices, one for the mouth and one for the ear, and you had to punch in the numbers. And then telephone devices were the analog devices that came to your house, where you have to rotate the numbers. You would have 0 to 9, and then you'll have to rotate it, and then the number will be transferred. And then you move to the push type, button type. And then again, and then came the mobile devices, the mobile telephones, which again had the push button type. And then it moved to touch screen. And then now it's moved to voice. So that's how the one particular feature of a mobile technology evolved. So this way you can look at a particular feature, or you can look at the mobile device itself. So the same example that I gave is applicable for the device itself. So how did the telephone technology evolve, the device itself? Or you can look at the communication industry. So how did the communication industry evolve over time? So then it's not restricted to mobile device. Your all other forms of communication, including Teams or WebEx or Zoom. So how did it start? And the starting point for communication would be good old days, centuries before, when they were using pigeons for communication. And then humans used to communicate in person or inscriptions. So you let go all the way back there, and then you can study the S-curve evolution of how the communication has evolved. And you don't stop with that. You can see what you can predict to a certain extent. What would be the next level of evolution? What would be the next thing in this evolution? And for you to identify all those, there are multiple tools in these trends. Say trends of increasing value, completeness of system, increasing coordination, increasing dynamicity. So I'll not get into details of this. So that's something that would be covered in level 2 and level 3. But we used some of these tools to try to solve one problem. And we were all just into TRIZ, all the three of us at the time. And this was, I would say it was a pretty good first shot at it. So this is briefly the S-curve evolution, how it happens. So as most of you know, first stage is the incubation stage, and then there would be the rapid growth, second stage, and then stabilization is called this third stage, and then a natural death is the final stage, at which point the next S-curve would start, the next evolution would start. So there are possibilities sometime where the particular technology or feature may not reach third stage or final stage. From second stage, it may directly jump into the second S-curve, but that's a totally different discussion that we can have. So what we took was, we took the industry of music industry. So the case study that we have taken was how the evolution of the communication in the form of one-side communication. That's the music industry you can consider. So we picked up when the first product in that segment was launched. So as you can see from here, the first ever device was a radio device that was launched in 1908. And then you had the transistor, and then the Walkman, the cassette-based Walkman, and then the MP3 player, the CD player, and then came the iPod, multiple series. So classic, mini, shuffle, nano, and touch was the last series that's still continuing, I believe. And then if you look at the days, so January 1st, 1908 was when the radio was launched, and that is considered as day zero. And then it took close to 50 years for the next version of the radio to come into market, the transistor. So it came in 1954. And then the next version of his Walkman, I think it was introduced in Japan by Sony, I believe, came in 1979, half the time, so close to 25 years. And then again, if you see the next version, another half, approximately same time, I would say 20 years. But then after that, if you see, the number of days for launch of each product has considerably gone down. So from 17,000 days to 9,000 days to 6,000 days. When the Nano was launched, the difference of time between Shuffle and Nano was only 240 days. That's 8 months. So that shows the sorry. Yeah. So that shows the evolution of the technology of music industry. And then if you see, it took a relatively long time, 2 years, for launch of touch. Because till Nano, if people remember or have used the device, I haven't used, but for this analysis, I did the study. So Nano had the scroll type, button type and the scroll type. There will be a circle, you'll have to operate that to get into the song that you want. And you did not have the option to choose the song that you want. It will always be in sequence. Whereas in touch, it was a totally disruptive technology. You had the option to touch and choose the song that you want. You can see on the screen and then pick the song that you want. So that's why it took that longer day. And then this normalized index, that's something that we calculated based on multiple parameters. I'll come back to this. But how did we arrive at these parameters? So now we have chosen an engineering system that is a radio or a music device. So how do you plot an S-curve? How do you arrive at a valid or a reasonable conclusion? And how do you arrive at a realistic prediction? So the trick lies in, you'll have to pick the different parameters or the features of the engineering system that you have taken. So if you look at our system, we broke it down into these 6 categories. So one is the device data itself. So under device data, we took the display, the storage space, the memory type, and then the volume indicator, the audio type, the earphone jack. So these are different devices that are present in the radio. And then the power. How is the power? Battery status display, the electrical connection, number of batteries, the voltage, the battery type, life, the transistor that was used. Similarly, the geometry, how it is communicating.
I think you muted yourself, Vinodh. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So what are the different controls like shuffle and repeat or tuning control, volume control? So volume control would include, if you say at the starting, it was a knob type without any control. It was a free flowing knob. And then it was stepped knob in transistors where you have 1, 2, 3, 4 multiple volumes, and then you had rolling type in Walkman, and then again now it has moved to discrete. So when it moved to Walkman, it was again analog. You did not have control. It was free flowing. And then again, you have now discrete volume 1, 2, 3, 4. You can set. And then again, what's the timeline, the cost, the weight, song selection display? What are the other unique features? So you'll have to break down your engineering system into critical parts of it and how each of that evolved. Because even in this, some of them may have faster S curve, some of them may have a slower S curve. So just to take an example, the memory type, it had a tremendous S curve in the last 10-15 years. But as compared to that, if you see previous 80 years, so I'm telling in this 1908 to 2007, that 100 year, if I see, it was only in the last 10 years there was a huge jump in the memory device. Before that, it was very incremental, I would say. So the memory type. Whereas volume indicator, relatively, the evolution was much faster. So the different components of your engineering system may be undergoing different S-curve evolution. So you'll have to normalize them. So that's where this normalized index comes in. Once we have taken all this, what we did was we studied multiple factors. In the first slide, if you remember, I showed the different trends that you see here. So there are all these trends available. So we picked up the trends that are relevant to our study, and then we analyzed them. And then we gave a normalized score. And so you see, for example, the seventh only law of part uneven development. So that was one. So transition from macro to micro level 0.47. So we had different scores based on different parameters that we had taken. So based on our study, this is the overall evolution curve that we arrived at. So on the x-axis, you see the product starting from transistor. We took it from transistor because radio was an outlier because that was the first product. So that had a score of 0.68, whereas from transistor it was consistent. And then on the y-axis, you see the normalized cumulative score. So you can clearly see that between transistor and Walkman, it was sort of an incubation period. And then from Walkman to MP3 player, that was a huge jump. And then between MP3 player and iPod Nano, though the look and feel of it greatly improved, the TRIZ shows that it was a stage of sustenance. And then there was a huge jump for the iPod Touch, which could indicate a possible disruption or a possible start of the next S curve. The death of this technology up until iPod Nano, and then the start of the next evolution, which is iPod Touch. So that's what you see here in terms of launch date as well as the normalized index of, we coined something called launch time MPV. So MPV is the main parameter of value. So in terms of launch parameter based on the launch time. So you could clearly see that the timeline was, the normalized index was pretty constant till MP3 player. And then for iPod Classic, and it jumped. And then again, it was following a certain timeline. And then we can see that at the time of iPod Nano, it was reaching its death stage. And then index for iPod Touch is 0.33, which lies in between this iPod Mini and iPod Shuffle. So our analysis at that time was, because the normalized index lies between iPod Mini and iPod Touch, so the subsequent products might also get launched between this timeline of say 240 days to 728 days. And so just before this talk, I checked back. So iPod Touch after 2007, every year or every 9 months, they are having a different version that has been launched. So that validates to a certain extent our study and analysis. And so this was my first. So this is a project for which I said I was a foot soldier. So I just did what I was told by my colleague Srikanth Adapalli, and this turned out to be a pretty good one. And then we presented this in the TRIZFest in 2014 in Prague, I believe. That happened in Prague, and it was well received because up until then there was no study that was as comprehensive as this, or at least nothing was presented. Companies or industries might have done, but they would have kept it for themselves, and nothing was presented before. So that's about this trends of engineering system evaluation and S-curve that I feel is very close to me, and then I like it a lot. But apart from this, as I mentioned, the other things that could be of pretty interesting is the standard inventive solutions, which if people are in level 2, they would know. So which is based on the substance that you take, and then the field interaction, and then the feature transfer. So these are some things that I find it very interesting. So this is what I had for as a presentation, but we can see if there are any questions at this point, or if people want to hear about challenges in because the last two talks did talk about the challenges in having imparting it in industry. So I don't know how much of that talking again would help.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Vinodh, for this wonderful presentation, and in fact supplemented by a very good, very simple case study, but a very effective case study. Okay. Participants, in case you have any queries with respect to TESE or the way this was getting implemented, or how Vinodh has been implementing it in his earlier organization G or his current organization TVS, probably in case there are any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions. Any questions from the participants over here?
Yeah, this is Nilesh here. Uh, so thanks for a very wonderful case study, a practical one. Can you please explain more on the score, how you calculated that score when you plotted this S-curve?
Yeah, so it would be difficult to explain entire details of how I calculated the score. But what I can do is I can take one example and then I try to explain. But you can go to TRIZFest website, and in 2014 or 15 there's a paper, or I can send the link to Narayan and you can get it from him. So the entire work has been published in a form of a paper proceeding.
Okay.
So you can go through that. So yeah, so for example, if you take the case of volume indicator, then or which one should I take? Yeah, volume indicator we would take. So if you take volume indicator, then how did the volume adjustment, I would say, volume control, not the volume indicator, but the volume control I would pick. So how did the volume control evolve from radio till iPod Touch? So, and what are the parameters? So, for example, in radio, it was you had a knob that you had to rotate. So this rotation would come under dynamization, so for example, because it gives you more flexibility. So in the trend, if you see, trends of increasing dynamization is what would suit mono, bi, poly. There are multiple levels in that. So you give a score for that, and then based on the number of controls, you calculate the score. For example, in transistor, you had the marking of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can place the knob in those positions. So it was like toothed knob. And then in Walkman, it was scrolling type. So you did not know whether it was 1 or 2 or 3. You just have to continuously scroll it. It was a continuous type, just like radio. So again, when it came to Walkman, it was the same MP3 player. In iPod series, again, it became digital. So from analog all these days, it became digital. So that's a huge jump. And in digital, again, did you have free flow or did you have control like 1, 2, 3? So these are the parameters and you give score for each of them. So that's how you arrive at a number for this controls. So similarly, you arrive at numbers for each of this and then normalize all this. So for example, if you have six ways of controlling the volume and in which way you are now. So out of 6, what is the score that you would give? So that's the score for volume control. So for all of these, you'll have to come at a value like this. And then for that product, what is the final value? So that's what you give there. So that's the value you see here.
Nilesh, I hope you are satisfied with the answer. Of course, it's a very complicated topic. It's not very easy for Vinod to explain it in 5 minutes. Of course, he attempted to answer it, but it's a very complicated topic, to be very frank.
Yeah, I can send that paper link and then Nilesh can go through it.
Yeah, that would be more helpful.
Please do that.
Yeah,
That
sure.
will be
Because you
great.
attempted to answer it, but then it's too short time for you to answer this question in elaborate.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any
Thank
other
you. Thanks a
question from
lot.
the participants? Any other question? Please feel free to unmute because these sessions are basically just to clear all your doubts about TRIZ and just to have an exchange of views and opinions about TRIZ so that you come and join this particular family of TRIZ. So please feel free to unmute.
This presentation, the topic can be, the question can be on anything. It may not be on this presentation.
Absolutely.
Narayan Harsha here.
Hmm?
Can I ask one question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Vinodh, good afternoon. Myself, Harsha. One question, when you were studying this evolution from radio transistor to iPod, the current state, so whether you were also considering the output, that is the headphones, because when we think of radio, there were no headphones. When we think of Walkman, the headphones started, and then we started getting the headphones of different quality and features, etc. Because that is also a very key element when it comes to the output of all these gadgets. So whether that was also considered while arriving at the score?
We did consider that. So if you remember on the left-hand side, the bottommost or the last button was the earphone jack. So that was one parameter that we considered.
Okay.
But we did not consider it in the form probably that you are imagining. Like the headphones, the evolution of headphones is not something that we were interested in.
Okay.
Because if you look at evolution of headphones, that itself is a different topic.
Okay.
Starting from the traditional normal radio without headphones to now what you have in the ear pod, or I don't know if there's anything beyond earpods also.
Okay. Because I thought of that because it is complementing this particular series of gadgets. That's why I thought of asking.
Exactly. Yeah. So the earphone jack was one parameter. So that is the intention is to see how the audio output is.
Right.
Yeah. So that was taken into account, the audio output format.
Thank you, Mr. Vinodh. Thank you.
Thanks, Harsha. Thanks.
Vinodh, this is Deepak. Vinodh, this is Deepak. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, Deepak, you're audible.
Vinodh, when we look at generating an S-curve for a nascent technology that is still coming up, it's not as straightforward as it looks, because we don't know what is in the future, what are the allied technologies, that would come up to enable some of the new, innovations that are going to happen. So how do you think of, what should be the team composition? How do we enable it in a complex organization?
Yeah. So
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so if you're looking at a nascent technology, so the level 3 teaches you in detail the evolution of S-curve and what are the indicators that a given technology is in a particular level, particular stage. For example, if it is so if you remember, there are 4 stages in the S-curve that I showed. So if it is in the first stage, then what are the indicators that it is in the first stage? So there are pointers for that, and there are also recommendations for technology. If it is in the first stage, then what are the recommendations that you can take for you to proceed to the next stage, for you to succeed to moving to second stage? So similarly for second stage, actually we try to use that for one of our papers that also we presented in TRIZFest, I think 2016 or 17, I don't remember. So, but it is very difficult because if it is extremely nascent technology, you will not have sufficient data points to formulate a S-curve that is reasonably reliable. So then you'll have to see other adjacencies that you can take into account that would help you formulate a S-curve. So it may not be highly accurate, but I'm sure that it would give much better direction than without an S-curve. Without doing this exercise, if you want to proceed, vis-a-vis you do this exercise and then you proceed. The second one would definitely give you much better direction.
Just to supplement, Vinod, in fact, there are tools in TRIZ which can actually help you forecast your next generation products. So if you use it very systematically, in fact, you can have your forecasting done well in advance. And then you can decide when exactly that particular market gets matured, and you can in fact start positioning your products also. Because it does happen that the product you cannot launch a product too very early also in the market. So at the right time you can launch it. So there are certain methods and tools wherein it helps you forecast your technology and product line. Yeah. Any other question from the participants? So Vinod, I have a question basically to you. In fact, of course, yes, TRIZ is not very popular in. Of course, it's again a challenging question for what do you say, which we debated even in the last session. TRIZ is not a very favorite topic when it comes to open discussions, and companies like GE have been practicing TRIZ for a long time. And if a person or a point of contact or a person who is passionate about TRIZ leaves that particular company, do you see death of TRIZ in the earlier company? Is it person driven or is it company driven? Your experience.
See, my experience is so if I look at GE, so it definitely is company driven, because for a process, for any process, whether it is a small or a big process or an initiative, small or big initiative, for any mid-sized or large-sized companies, it's extremely difficult to be person-driven. The company has to have the buy-in. Company has to be, convinced that this is something that would help the company. Otherwise, it's very difficult to drive it. So if it is person-driven, then I am afraid it will die off in a year or two. They may give you some time, but it's very difficult if it is person driven. So it has to be company driven for it to sustain and grow.
Right. And supplement question to this, Vinod, how many years did GE take to reach to this particular level? Because it's not a very short-term journey. It has to be a long-term journey.
Yeah, I think in GE, TRIZ started somewhere in 2004 or 5, I think. And it took close to 7-8 years to have the first level 3.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
it takes at least a decade.
Yeah.
And also, it also depends on how big or smaller company is. Probably relatively smaller companies can march much faster. G being a huge company, it had its inertia and then priorities. So it took time for TRIZ to percolate into multiple businesses, because G doesn't work on single business. So it has aviation, oil and gas, energy, healthcare. So
Right.
multiple businesses, and you had to convince multiple leadership that TRIZ is a tool that can work.
Right.
And so it did take a decade, I would say.
Okay. And one more question in continuation with this. We if you go back 20 years or 15 years back, we used to see something called as the Motorola way of Six Sigma, the G way of Six Sigma. Why don't we see TRIZ being popularized by these known companies? Any particular reason? I'm not sure whether you have an answer for this, but why is this particular thing not getting popularized as the G way of TRIZ, the Motorola way of whatever, just like Six Sigma got popularized?
See, I would say one of the reasons is, see, Six Sigma, if you take for example, that is something which is in-house, and it is a process. It is a tool for improving your process, and process is something that you do day in and day out, and an improvement in the process can be seen very easily. If you do a Six Sigma project and then you improve on a process, or you do a design for Six Sigma and then you improve on a design or a product, then that's something that's can be seen easily. But whereas TRIZ is something that is related to innovation, and innovation, um, it takes a relatively longer time to see the results in innovation, and many companies, unfortunately or fortunately, are running against time, and they don't have the time to test a new tool. So there's always this inertia of what if I fail? And in this cutthroat market, failure is something that's not acceptable. So you want every product that you launch to be successful.
Okay.
So that's why there's some inertia to implement TRIZ in large scale as they implement Six Sigma. And Six Sigma has been around for decades, and they've seen the results, and it's a set process. Whereas TRIZ came out of USSR only when USSR broke into Russia and multiple other countries. So people started moving out to US and Europe, and then it was only in mid and late 90s that they started teaching TRIZ outside Russia. So it's, if I see that way, it's only 20-year-old methodology outside Russia. And for it to reach countries like ours, which is huge, and then to create an impact, it would definitely take time.
Right. Okay. Thanks for this answer, Vinodh. And there's a question coming on the chat box, Vinodh. I'm sure you can read it also. I'll read it for you. Following this direction of conversation, do you have examples of TRIZ strategy roadmap that a company embarking on this TRIZ journey, some way of aligning it to its organizational strategy?
Okay, so probably I was seeing the last thing. Yeah, now is it is following this direction of conversation? Do you have examples of TRIZ strategy roadmap that a company embarking on its TRIZ journey? So roadmap that a company, okay, TRIZ strategy roadmap. So okay, so see, like any other process or any other new initiative that you want to introduce in your company, the standard roadmap that I've seen companies employees start to have a critical mass of people trained in that, and then have a few success stories, and then convince the leadership and then the broader employees of the company, the larger employees set of the company that this can give results. And then from there, it will directly be a pull from the people rather than you pushing to have this as a part of your culture. So I don't remember seeing any formal strategy except in Samsung. So Samsung had a strategy. I think people who had attended the first TRIZtalks, Oleg showed their strategy. What's the strategy that they follow, and they still follow it. But that's possible for a big and established company like Samsung, who can allocate a certain amount of fund for this and then take the risk. But in general, for majority of the companies, it's very difficult to have a roadmap for interest and then follow it strictly. Next is, do you have any
Examples of identifying new MPV at GE?
No, yeah. So as I said, the ones that I've published or the work that was done outside the technology area that GE was working, and the ones that I worked in GE, I'm not sure if if it would be fair for me to talk now because I'm moved out of GE, and I don't know what's the status of it. So I moved out 3 years back. So it would not be fair for me to talk about without knowing what's the current status of it. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
We appreciate that also, Vinodh. That's not a problem, absolutely. In case Mr. Pandit wants to have more information, probably you can reach out to Vinodh on one-on-one, and in case Vinodh is comfortable, he can share that particular thing with you. Okay, so moving ahead, any more questions from the participants from the implementation point of view or from the learning point of view? Okay, there's one question coming from Akhilesh. Akhilesh, probably you can unmute and ask it also. You mentioned Samsung, and as I understand, it has the largest number of TRIZ masters. Has its strategy been published anywhere?
Yeah, so this is Akhilesh. I'm thinking in terms of organizations that have sort of thought they want to move in that direction, but are not sure how to get there. You know, they can train a critical number of people at the level 1 or perhaps less, whether you think in terms of belts. But if they want to have a roadmap, perhaps even you mentioned Samsung, they can shrink it down. That might align with their own strategy. Because many companies that I've seen, they're thinking, yeah, we'll train and then something happens and nothing really happens because they don't exactly have a roadmap where they want to go, how they want to proceed. So I'm wondering any examples we can show them.
Yeah, so Samsung has a strategy, and I think if you search for Oleg Fagenson presentation, I think there's something available in public, either his YouTube video or one of his presentations. I remember seeing their strategy. So
Yeah,
I can explain it to you.
Samsung has published one paper probably. Even I will try to dig it out, and in case I find it, I'll definitely share it with you, Akhilesh.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
sure.
I can briefly mention to you what it is in 2 minutes, but you can go through in detail. So Samsung has a separate cell for innovation, and TRIZ is part of it. And their only job is to filter the technologies, the innovations that come out, and see if it is worth. And then any new challenge that Samsung has, it will be thrown to TRIZ team also, and then they will work on it. And on an annual basis, they have a TRIZ challenge or something. So it is a 3-day event, and everybody who has solved problems using TRIZ will present it. And then the chairman of the company would be there at the closing ceremony, and then he will verify it, he will check it, and then he will judge it. So it's driven by the head of the company. So that's where the real pull comes into. And they also break themselves into multiple groups during this 3-day challenge, sort of hackathon also. So there are various initiatives to impart TRIZ in the company. So just training people would not be sufficient. So you need to have, for example, say once in a year, a 3-day hackathon where the company will give 10 problems and you will use only your TRIZ knowledge and try to get solutions. Whether they are workable or not, that's secondary. But first, people need to get comfortable with using TRIZ.
Yes.
That's the first step.
The questions I find from organization is, you know, we've done Lean and Six Sigma, and where does TRIZ fall? And I said there are different things. It's more a question of you having a toolbox and methodologies. and you've got to see what is appropriate where. But many of them who've gone through Six Sigma black belt and stuff, now they're thinking, is this the new thing? How much do we go in that direction? What models can we follow? And you mentioned GE and Samsung. Not a lot is published from the that I know of from a strategy or high level standpoint. Perhaps it's because of competition. So that's why I'm asking you if perhaps there's something we can show them to help get trees moving along further.
Yeah, so
Sure.
in fact, at least somebody has shared the link on the chat box also. So probably you can copy this link, and it's a Samsung paper. So probably you can go through it. Probably you might get some answers over there. Okay. So moving ahead, can we have the last question in case any participant has, because we have only 4 minutes to wind up. So in case there is any last question coming up from the participant. Any last question? Okay, so no questions from the participants. So Vinodh, I will like to ask you basically any final word from you for these participants or for the people who are wanting to get into this particular family of trees or who have already in this family of trees. Any word of what do you say, guidance from you, how they can get into it or how they can carry this forward? A quick wrap up for this particular session from your side.
So my only suggestion or request would be to persevere, because it's not going to be easy to implement this in companies if you are starting. It would need a lot of perseverance and convincing to the senior leadership, because I've seen the struggle and then the time it took for TRIZ to percolate in GE. So it definitely is a time-consuming process, and people have a set mindset. And as you interact with people who are technically strong, the first thought is that I have been in this technology for 20 years. What you as a TRIZ person without knowing the technology can get me the answer. But precisely that's what TRIZ does. You don't need technical expertise beyond a certain level to arrive at directions of solutions. So that convincing is an extremely difficult thing. So because that hurts their personal ego to a certain extent. All their 20 years of effort that they have been putting, you come as a TRIZ person and you tell them, no, I can solve this problem. So that's something that will take a lot of effort. So perseverance is the key, I would say.
Right. And any key guidance from your side for the education sector, because there are some people from the education fraternity also joining in. So anything for the education sector?
So that's something that I am working on a small scale, trying to see how TRIZ can be introduced in schools and colleges. Colleges, it's still relatively easy, but I'm trying to see how can I get it into high school and higher secondary, 9, 10, 11, 12,
Great.
just to give them a flavor of TRIZ. So probably it should be simple examples we should give, simple real life examples. The solutions might not have come from TRIZ, but we can tell them that this is an example of TRIZ. So make it example based rather than theory based. Give them a lot of examples, and through examples try to tell them that this is something that you can do if you have the knowledge of TRIZ, if you gain experience in TRIZ. So that's how I think TRIZ should be taken to schools and colleges.
True. Great. And I know there are books, a lot of books on TRIZ for education for children, but unfortunately everything is in Russian. So we have to wait till this book gets translated and comes to the world. So nevertheless, I think it was a good session, and thank you, Vinodh, for your time and sharing down your experience. And I'm sure you also enjoyed